Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jayam Vishtabad, Paramahangs, Parivrajacharya, Status Samad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Sri Sri Radha Radhanath Ki, Sri Giri Govardhan Ki, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki, Sankirtan Yagya Ki, Go Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 9. Dhruva Maharaj returns home, verse 66. Vikshota Vyasam Tam Cha Prakritinam Cha Samatam Anurakta Prajam Raja Dhruvam Chakre Bhuva Patim Vikshyodavyasam Tamcha Prakritinam Cha Samatam Anurakta Prajam Raja Dhruvam Chakre Bhuvapatim Vikshyodavyasam Tamcha Prakritinam Cha Samatam Anurakta Prajam Raja Dhruvam Chakre Bhuvapatim Vikshyodavyasam Tamcha Prakritinam Cha Samatam Anurakta Prajam Raja Dhruvam Chakre Bhuvapatim Prakritinam Samatam Anurakta Prajam Raja Dhruvam Chakre Bhuvapatim. Ladies, Prakritinam Chasamatam Anurakta Prajam Raja Dhruvam Chakre Bhuvapatim Vikshoda Vaisam Tamcha Prakritinam Chasamatam Anurakta Prajam Raja Dhruvam Chakre Bhuvapatim Vikshoda Vayasam Tamcha Prakritinam Chasamatam Anuraktam Prajam Raja Dhruvam Chakre Bhuvapatim Vikshoda Vasam Tamcha Prakritinam Chasamatam Anuraktam Prajam Raja Dhruvam Chakre Bhuvapatim Vikshya. After seeing Udhavayasam, mature in age, Tam, Dhruva, Cha, and Prakritinam, by the ministers, Cha, also, Samatam, approved of, Anurakta, beloved, Prajam, by his subjects, Raja, the king, Dhruvam, Dhruva Maharaj, Chakre, made, Bhuva, of the earth, Patim, master. Translation: when, after concentration, King Uttanapad saw that Dhruva Maharaj was suitably mature to take charge of the kingdom, and that his ministers were agreeable, and the citizens were also very fond of him, he enthroned Dhruva as emperor of this planet. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Although it is misconceived that formerly the monarchical government was autocratic, from the description of this verse, that not only was King Uttanapad a Rajarshi, but before installing his beloved son Dhruva on the throne of the empire of the world, he consulted his ministerial officers, considered the opinion of the public, and also personally examined Dhruva's character. Then the king installed him on the throne to take charge of the affairs of the world. When a Vaishnav king like Dhruva Maharaj is the head of the government of the entire world, the world is so happy that it is not possible to imagine or describe. Even now, if people would all become Krishna conscious, the democratic government of the present day would be exactly like the kingdom of heaven. If all people become Krishna conscious, they would vote for persons of the category of Dhruva Maharaj. If the post of chief executive were occupied by such a Vaishnav, all the problems of satanic government would be solved. The youthful generation of the present day is very enthusiastic in trying to overthrow the government in different parts of the world. But unless people are Krishna conscious, like Dhruva Maharaj, there will be no appreciable changes in government, because people who hanker to attain political position by hook or by crook cannot think of the welfare of the people. They are only busy to keep their position of prestige and monetary gain. They have very little time to think of the welfare of the citizens. Viksyoda vayasam tam cha, prakritinam cha samatam, anurakta prajam raja, dhruvam chakre bhuva patim. When, after concentration, King Uttanapad saw that Dhruva Maharaj was suitably mature to take charge of the kingdom, and that his ministers were agreeable, and the citizens were also very fond of him, he enthroned Dhruva as emperor of this planet. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha paditanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yes, so Dhruva Maharaj, he came back from the forest some years ago now, and he's been there in the kingdom, and he's been working with King Uttanapad, being trained by King Uttanapad, and also the ministers, and also interacting with the public in certain respects. And so it has become clear that he is ready to take charge of the kingdom. And the Vedic system was, at least in many cases, as soon as the generally oldest son was ready enough then his father, the current king, would hand over, and the king would not, hang on, which is the practice generally these days. I mean, there are different practices, but that's one of the common ones. Because there's some being in charge of a country, what to speak of the whole planet, but even just some country, there's great advantage for the person who's ruling. At the very least, they get a lot of glorification and appreciation, sincere or otherwise, but they get a lot. And that is something. It's said that when people have so much money, they've just got so much that they have enough aeroplanes, they have enough vehicles, they have enough palaces, etc., just more than enough. Then what can they do with their money which will give them something? They'll feel they're getting some value from their money. So at least what was said in this context here is that they feel that the best use of their money in terms of what they will get out of it is to give it to people who will appreciate and say very nice things. And the happiness they get out of hearing the nice things, they feel that even if they invested $1 million or some millions, they'll feel it was a good investment because how could we have got more pleasure? Buy another motor car? They've already got, like one of them a while ago had 93 Rolls Royces, among others. And so what else are you going to do? Krishna, Krishna. So, but the Vedic system is different, that the adults, the educated people, they understand that even though we've got responsibilities, generally it was like that, the majority were householders, in this case Kshatriyas, others were Vaishyas, and Brahmins were there, of course. So their understanding of life, what is the goal of life, was so clear and correct that they understood as soon as we are able, in a proper way, in a nice way, not an irresponsible way of just abandoning things, but as soon as we're able to hand over whatever our responsibilities are to a responsible person, young person, then they do that. And then come out and focus completely in Krishna consciousness, on their personal cultivation of Krishna consciousness and also spreading Krishna consciousness. And they would understand that in the meantime, while we've been, in this case, ruling, or in other cases, managing some business enterprise or agricultural enterprise or some school perhaps, if they're Brahmins, then, so that's very good, and they would do it wholeheartedly. But they would understand that really the conclusion is that I will then go and focus my life 100% cultivating remembrance of the Lord and coming closer to the Lord. Yes, so Uttanapad was not really an old man. You know what I read yesterday? I was looking at different references, etc., etc., and I looked at Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai, and I looked at Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's purport to this verse, and I almost hesitate to tell you what he says. But his purport to this verse, one sentence purport, he quotes the first line of the Sanskrit, or part of it, Uda Vayasam, which is referring to age, maturity. And he says, Uda Vayasam means he had reached Yovana 15 years. So Hare Krishna, what can you say? At least that's what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said. And seeing that his son was 15, and of course, intensively trained and monitored by the ministers, and it's just a whole way of life of being trained for these types of positions. Anyway, whether it was 15, whatever it was, but Uttanapad felt, yes, the time is right for him and for me, so let me hand over. And of course, as we noticed, Srila Prabhupada's first point in the purport was that people think, in fact, say in the Western world particularly, where there used to be monarchies, there still are a few, but there used to be monarchies which would actually rule. They were actually the rulers and not ceremonial figures or something like that, but they actually controlled, oftentimes with iron hands. They controlled the goings on in the kingdom, and the history was such that there's the famous saying which Prabhupada also referred to on a few occasions: power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So that's what happened. And so in the beginning of the switch, in Europe at least, from monarchy to democracy, or even socialism in some places. But in the beginning, there were revolutions, and the kings and queens got kicked out and killed in many cases. But later on, like in England, being very, anyway, it's a joke, cultured, but they did sort of kick them out, but then let them in, and then let them sort of carry on. And in businesses, I've seen in Indian businesses sometimes, the father has reached the age he just can't handle it any longer, and the sons are running it, but they give him a special office on top, and it's called kicking the person upstairs. And they present reports to them, and this is what's happening and that's what's happening. But actually he's just an old man, and he doesn't. But they sort of patronize him, flatter him like that. So, but there is this idea, particularly from, if you look at European history, of how monarchical governments were autocratic and vicious, actually, and just ruthless in maintaining absolute control. And that's sort of, in many people's minds, that's the idea they have of at least the old, when the kings and queens, they really used to rule, that they just decided everything. They decided everything. And anyone who said anything in opposition or even in anything other than complete support, in so many cases, would be taken to be a traitor and executed, or at the very least sort of exiled to some place where they couldn't do anything. But here we see that the Vedic tradition, truly speaking, as like an authentic and authorized and very intelligently organized and put together and conducted monarchical government, that things were done, even though there was a king and the king was the king, but things were done in extremely responsible ways. It was not just him just ordering everything and everyone around. So, the first point was that the Kshatriya children, particularly in the actual royal family, the Kshatriya boys were trained from, like, when they were little children. They were trained in being Kshatriyas and being rulers. They were trained and trained and trained, like 7 days a week. And it was just a major program of training. So when the time came, whenever the time came, when it was felt they were mature enough, intelligent enough, responsible enough, and even experienced enough, and they would take over, you had people take over the ruling who were experts at ruling, because to rule a temple, how about to rule a country? To rule a country, my gosh, what is that? It's such a massive job to rule millions of people. But the program nowadays of at least democracy, shall we say, is that whoever's clever enough to speak in such ways that the innocent public, or the public who have their vested interests, feel this man is going to help us as we want to be helped, then they get voted in. But how many of these people have been trained in governing a country? In many cases, the training they have had is that they're lawyers. Many of them come from legal backgrounds, but which is something. It's better than nothing. But it's not like being trained from childhood how to actually manage a country and look after the people and look after all the military arrangements, economic arrangements, and all that. And with a fully trained team of faithful, dedicated people to help you, then there's a chance of a country being ruled nicely, not just nicely, but in a wonderful way. And it's not just a matter of someone taking power and ruling autocratically, and you do what I say or else. It doesn't work. Doesn't work well. And so we see nowadays that the situations, anyway, it's really, in a sense, it's quite pathetic. And like Prabhupada says, that nowadays the rulers, they're only busy to keep their position of prestige and monetary gain. They have very little time to think of the welfare of the citizens. So anyway, the thing is here that this is the first point Prabhupada makes, that about how Uttanapad was a Rajarshi. He was a saintly king. He wasn't just some big manager, but he was a very saintly devotee who was a big manager. And he had trained Dhruva for quite some time and felt that he's actually qualified. And then his ministers, his whole team of experts, like departmental experts, who were very faithful and in a mood of service, they could do things very nicely. So in the second part of the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that when a Vaishnav king like Dhruva Maharaj, and we should note, like Dhruva Maharaj, is the head of the government of the entire world, the world is so happy that it is not possible to imagine or describe. That's very amazing language, isn't it? That's really amazing. Of course, the king has to be like Dhruva Maharaj. And where are the up-and-coming Dhruva Maharajas? I don't think King Charles III is quite up to it. And others who would like to, we won't mention any names, but who would like to be in the position of king where you don't have to worry about getting voted out every few years. But who is qualified like that? Well, the fact is that actually nobody. But if you remember, we had Ram Navami just recently, and the description is there of what the situation in the kingdom was like when Lord Ram was ruling. So let me just read a couple of verses just to remind us. This is 9th canto, chapter 10, first of all, verse 51. Tretayam vartamanayam kala krita samobhavat rame rajani dharmagye sarvabhuta sukavahe. Lord Ramachandra became king during Treta Yuga, but because of his good government, the age was like Satya Yuga. Everyone was religious and completely happy. O Maharaj Parikshit, best of the Bharat dynasty, during the reign of Lord Ramachandra, the forests, the rivers, the hills and mountains, the states, the 7 islands, and the 7 seas were all favorable in supplying the necessities of life for all living beings. When Lord Ramachandra the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was the king of this world, all bodily and mental suffering, disease, old age, bereavement, lamentation, distress, fear, and fatigue were completely absent. There was even no death for those who did not want it. I remember when I first read this verse many years ago, in the 70s, then I thought, I was taken aback. It really sounded astonishing. Then I read the purport. Let me just read the purport. It's a short purport. All these facilities existed because of Lord Ramachandra's presence as the king of the entire world. A similar situation could be introduced immediately, even in this age called Kali, the worst of all ages. It is said, Kali Kale, Nama Rupe, Krishna Avatar. Krishna descends in this Kali Yuga in the form of his holy name. Hare Krishna. Okay, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Although Srila Prabhupada just says Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. If we chant offenselessly, Ram and Krishna are still present in this age. The kingdom of Ram was immensely popular and beneficial. It wasn't just popular, and beneficial, and immensely beneficial. And the spreading of this Hare Krishna movement can immediately introduce a similar situation even in this Kali Yuga. There's certain things which, at least for me, which Prabhupada says, which when I come across them, it makes me think that Prabhupada is just from another world. He's just from another dimension. He's just another type of person, in the sense of being divine. That, we read here, if a devotee king like Dhruva could be head of the government of the world will be so happy that it's not possible to imagine or describe. Not possible for us to imagine because we never saw anything like it. We never saw anything vaguely, even extremely vaguely like it. So how are we going to picture it? We have no sort of resources to picture from or describe it. But someone like Srila Prabhupada, Transcendental Personality, then for him, such things, there's reality behind the words, and not just, nice feelings or philosophy, although there are many nice feelings and lots of philosophy, but there's reality behind the words, which people like him are living in. One devotee tells the story that Srila Prabhupada and he and I think one other were up on the roof of the Lotus building in Mayapur, and Srila Prabhupada was talking about how nice Mayapur is. They're up on the roof. In those days, we had no other buildings, and there was a number of temples around, but nothing substantial. Otherwise, the Mayapur area is very green and luxuriant and just very sort of rich in natural terms. So Prabhupada was saying that, yes, Mayapur is so wonderful. It's just so wonderful. We want the world to come and see Mayapur and experience Mayapur. And then Prabhupada sort of changed the subject a little and said, but this world, this material world, is too much. It's terrible, it's horrible. And then Prabhupada, just according to this devotee who told us, who was there, Prabhupada said, I didn't want to come, but Krishna told me, you must come and the people need your books. And then Prabhupada said again, but I told Krishna, I don't want to come because it's not nice. But Krishna told me, no, you must come. They need your books. Anyway, Hare Krishna. This was told to us by someone we would consider a reliable source, old Prabhupada disciple. Yes, so when we read these types of statements from Srila Prabhupada, it gives me at least, a sense of how he's in a higher consciousness and just in a higher place, where the reality, not just the possibility, that wouldn't it be nice, wouldn't it be nice if the government was nice? Not just like that, but the actual possibilities for society, for civilization, if or when Krishna consciousness really becomes established. If Krishna consciousness really becomes established. And, sometimes Prabhupada would emphasize or talk about, we must try to influence the influential people, like the government people, and that's there. But then at other times, Prabhupada would say that we must preach widely to the people in general. Because when the people in general, if they've read enough books, had enough experience of Krishna consciousness, and so many have become devotees, like really committed devotees, then of course the system of politics, of government now is democracy. So if enough of the people feel like that, then the government, they will have to become Krishna conscious, because the people will not tolerate anything else. So, Prabhupada here in the purport makes the point, because Prabhupada, this is the 4th canto, means this is like 1973, something like that. And in America, particularly the Western world, there was a lot of, the youth were becoming very outspoken. Prabhupada says, the youthful generation of the present day is very enthusiastic in trying to overthrow the government in different parts of the world. But unless people are Krishna conscious like Dhruva Maharaj, there will be no appreciable changes in government. Even though the people in government may change, but the standards and how the people in general are facilitated and looked after, they're not really going to feel benefited unless Krishna consciousness is there. Because conditioned consciousness means particularly anyone who's conditioned, but particularly those who are deeply conditioned and deeply attached to material existence, that Prabhupada says this type of government, they're only busy to keep their position of prestige and monetary gain. They have very little time to think of the welfare of the citizens. And it's not just time, but they're just not capable. Their selfishness is so deeply ingrained in their psychology that they're not really capable of thinking in like extensive ways of how to benefit the people. I mean, in any ways really, but particularly in ways which may actually benefit the people. For that, Krishna consciousness is needed. Otherwise, if people do not have Krishna consciousness, then their minds, it's more or less like they must remain narrow and self-centered. They must. And the ability to think more broadly and more generously and more selflessly, it's a real struggle for them. The capacity to think like that is not there. And therefore you go from one government to another, and it really doesn't help the people much, if at all, and it may even make things worse. So this is what is required, and this is what is required for us too, because we are meant to be members of the Sankirtan movement. Means that our main activity is to spread Krishna consciousness. The temple is here, and very important part of the program for presenting Krishna consciousness. But ultimately it's all meant to lead to us spreading Krishna consciousness. Going out, getting out, meeting people, giving people Krishna consciousness. This will help us as a sadhana, to get out of our comfortable little situation and get out in the midst of what's going on in the world, and to give people Krishna consciousness. This will help us become conditioned by what sometimes, back in the old days, I remember, would be called temple-itis. You're living in the temple and doing service, and it's just wonderful. It's just great. But the spirit and or the ability to get out and give people Krishna consciousness becomes a little sort of restricted. But therefore it's good to get out and to break some of those little sort of Krishna conscious attachments and give people Krishna consciousness. It's the only thing that's going to help them, but it will also help us too. So, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Any comments, Maharaj, words of wisdom or correction? Constant training. Yeah. Well, when there's that constant training in terms of kshatriyas and ruling, then there's a possibility of them ruling properly. Otherwise, if someone's just voted in, some businessman is voted in, what's the possibility of them being able to rule a country? Jai Sachinandan Prabhu.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. You were speaking about absolute. I remember initially studied about famous English Sir Oliver Cromwell. He made this famous line: "Taxation without representation is tyranny." And he led a revolt against it.
Cromwell, was it? Yeah. But, just a little piece of British history. He got control, but then he wanted to become the king. Yeah. He wanted to be enthroned as the king. Anyway, old habits die hard.
In the Varnashram, which was prevalent in the Vedic times, there was like the Brahmanas actually were the actual leaders.
Right.
And we see that there was one very bad king, King Vaina. He was such a terrible king that the Brahmanas had to get rid of him,
Right.
put him away. And then they installed monarch Pretu, who was at that time very, he didn't feel he was qualified.
Right.
Then he became one of the most glorified kings. Like King Dhruva Maharaj,
Sure. Right. And it's interesting, Pretu he just was put on the throne, just on the spot. But the thing is, he is a Shaktivesh avatar. And he has the particular, royal potency, that Shakti of the Lord. But otherwise, they were trained and trained and trained. Yeah. So they're they're real professionals. Hare Krishna. Okay. Srila Prabhupada Ke.